I'm so unprepared today. I've gone live, and yet I've realized that I don't actually have my headphones plugged in. And this is my sound studio. So this is actually where I do all of my recordings. And that probably didn't sound very good. I don't even know if anyone could hear the beginning, but the point is, I'm in my sound studio here, and everything changes every 5 minutes when I'm doing like a recording or whatever, or even if I'm just practicing. So let's see if I can actually get this microphone set up. It's not looking good right now. Test. Okay, that doesn't sound too bad. I'm really of two minds in doing this video. And the reason for that is that there was so much controversy about certain things with the first video. It all turned out to be BS. Um, but I don't want to create controversy where there shouldn't be any. Let me just tighten this guy up here if I can. We'll see how it goes. This is the thing when you play guitar, is that you would think it would strengthen everything, but it actually, I've got like tendonitis and stuff from playing guitar. Okay, so the subject matter today, and I'm kind of hoping that I'm putting an end to this, like all of these videos that involve the Bay City Rollers. I may have some other videos in the future that can just talk about their music, and maybe I'll even like show different chord progressions, and people can like learn about their music and stuff like that, right? But I'm kind of hoping that this is the last video about the controversy about the band. Okay. And so the subject matter today, even though people may not believe this, and I think I put when I was starting it up that I will delete comments on this one. So if there's hatred from one member of the band to another member of the band, like as their fans, I will delete that, because that's not what I'm talking about, even though it's very hard to believe that, right? What I'm actually talking about today is the press. So the music press and just the general press. Okay. And I'm going to lead off with an example if I can find it. I have to do this all on Windows. And I hate Windows. Okay. Here's a headline. I have to click on the no thanks on this. Okay. Here's a headline. Okay. This is actually in Canada. Unbelievable. So this blew up around the world, and it's nothing to do with the Rollers at all. But it's an example of how insidious the music press is. This is the headline. Pete Townsend apologizes after remarks about deceased Who bandmates. Okay. Now, I think he had said something along the lines of, well, it was a nightmare playing with the rhythm section of Keith Moon, right, and John Entwistle and the band, because I'm trying to play guitar. And, if you have never played in a band before, it might sound like he's just insulting them. But I want to get into this. I want to say, so I do a lot of crappy covers. Everyone sees them. One band that I cannot cover, it's an impossibility, is The Who. Why can't I do a cover of The Who? Well, it's very simple. Keith Moon was such a dynamic percussionist, always like heading in so many directions at a time, that with me, I have to use Easy Drummer 3 or something like that to program in like the beats and all that for my music. There's no way that I can do a recording of a song by The Who where anyone's going to take it seriously. I would actually require to it would be required that I have a drum set and that I be very competent on it, at least like mildly competent on it to play what he's doing. And I don't have a drum kit. I have to program all this stuff, or I have to choose rhythms and then I add stuff into it afterwards, right? That's just the state of affairs. So Keith Moon is one of those drummers who he is just he's not one of those drummers. He is the drummer. I mean, he is out on a tangent constantly. He's keeping rhythm, but he's also going out and doing fills where no one else would do any of those fills. Okay. So you have him. And then you have John Entwistle, who was just flying around on the bass, And even with stuff like The Kids Are All Right, he was already starting to do that. Right. And so what Pete was saying was it was a nightmare playing with these guys because as a guitarist, I'm just leaning on them to get the rhythm and the bass. And as a guitarist, I have to keep, doing what I'm trying to do. And so it's very hard to play with Keith Moon and John Entwistle because they are absolute masters at what they are doing. And they are the greatest. They are the greatest in rock and roll. So Pete Townsend apologizes after remarks about deceased Who bandmates. He was not saying that he hated them. He was not saying that playing with them was awful. What he's saying is it was a challenge because these guys, this rhythm section is making him work so hard, right, to stay in rhythm. That's what he's saying. But this is what I want to talk about with the music press. They will turn that into a negative story. They will turn that into a story about Pete Townsend accusing Keith Moon and John Entwistle of not being great, when what he's really saying is they were some of the greatest of all time. Okay? So that's what this video is about. It is about the music press and the press. And what do they want? What do you want? Money. They want money. So if they can put up a headline that says Pete Townsend, says bad things, that gets them money. Okay. Now, I want to go way back to like 1964. And there is a book that you can read. Now I have to pull this up. I'm so bad with Windows. This is so bad. This is the book. Okay. And it's so interesting that all this stuff comes from the UK. This is the book, Folk Devils and Moral Panics. Okay. So now we use today, the term moral panics all the time. Where does that come from? It comes from this book, Folk Devils and Moral Panics. What is it about? That book gives a history of the British press from the beginning of the mods and rockers through all of the riots, the beach riots, and everything else. And what is the story that we get from that book? Okay. The story we get from that book is that there were some small fights. I think it was in Clacton. So, like a smaller town where mods, they're all dressed in suits and driving scooters, had gone to this smaller town where people ride motorcycles and have leather jackets, and they got into some fights. Okay. There was nothing to do. Maybe the weather wasn't great, whatever. There were these fights. It was not a big deal. It's not something that should have made it into any national newspapers. But here's the thing about the press. They smell money like they smell like a shark smells blood. And so they started pumping this stuff up. It's like, oh, the mods and the rockers, this is bad. Youth have gone bad. And I want to say also in the UK, there is a class system there. So you've got generally a you know, tabloids and the broadsheets and all this other stuff, that are part of the class system that are essentially sicking the working class amongst themselves. Okay, that's my opinion. But anyway, what ends up happening, if you're familiar with the Mods and the Rockers, and if you've ever seen the movie Quadrophenia, it's a good document. Well, it's not a documentary, but it shows some of this stuff. What ended up happening is that the fights got larger and larger until, bank holiday weekend, they went down to Brighton, and the beach was generally taken over by Mods and Rockers, and they beat the crap out of each other, right? And for me, I grew up as a mod. Like after my little punk period, I went back to the music that I loved, which was like Motown and reggae and ska and stuff like that. And so I was into that stuff. But the thing that always confused me is like, why would a mod ever go on the beach and mess up his suit? In today's today, if you wanted a two-tone mohair suit, that's a $3,000 suit today. Why the hell would you be on the beach beating the crap out of somebody in this suit? It doesn't make any sense. And it didn't make any sense. And if you watch the film Quadrophenia, what the Who are actually saying in there is that well, there's this scene where Jimmy, who is the main character, he and his friends are beating up some rockers, and then he realized that one of the guys is his childhood friend. So why are they doing this? Well, the reason they're doing it is because the press generally told them. The press generally said mods hate rockers, and they're going to be in fights, and then so there were these huge fights on the beach. And now I've got a dog that's barking. That's fine. So I just to do a quick summary here. What has the mu- Bella? I swear to God, two stories of the music press right now. Pete Townsend apologizes after remarks about deceased Who bandmates. BS. Total BS. He was actually complimenting them on being great. Folk Devils and Moral Panics. Great sociology text. What does it say? The mods and the rockers were not going to destroy England, but the press got them fighting. And it's a huge historical thing, that we have, with the mods and the rockers fighting each other. But as a former mod and a person who has like mohair suits and stuff, I would never be caught dead on a beach with a pair of leather soled shoes and a $3,000 suit, getting in a fight with a rocker. Like it never made sense to me, and it was BS. And it was something that the press pushed. And yeah, so that book, Folk Devils and Moral Panics. Anyone who's interested in popular culture, I think they should read that, and it'll give them a little bit of an idea. Now, the next one, and this is where it gets sensitive, and I don't want to piss people off, and I don't think that the people that are involved in this are what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm talking about the press. Okay, what has to be done in order for something to become a news story, right? Let me read the headline of this news story. And just so you know, this is kind of one of the things that kind of irked me, that it took years for a lot of things that a lot of people said that got me to finally make the first video that I made. Okay. But this one played a part. And I want to say again, it's about the news media. Here's the headline: Bay City Fakers. Here's the byline: Band, quotes, never played on many of their hits. Now, if you watch my first video, there's a link to a video from Janny Loves BCR with Woody responding to the fact that people had been saying for years that they didn't play their instruments, and then Eric. I really love Eric's response. He's like, "Yeah, they said we sucked and we didn't play our instruments." Like, what the hell are you even talking? So someone else sucked, or we like who? What are you even saying, right? And I think he's just brilliant in what he's saying there, but I don't think a lot of people saw it. Okay. Here's the story: they are Scotland's most successful pop group who topped the charts around the world and sold 120 million records. But ahead of the launch of a retrospective CD collection, the Bay City Rollers singer has confirmed what many might have suspected that the band did not actually play on many of their hits. Okay, totally over the top journalism, right? Disgusting journalism as we read further, okay? With reference to Les, he was the only member of the group allowed in the studio while the rest of the music was the work of session performers. That created a little animosity between the band and myself, said Les. The Edinburgh based group shot to fame in the early 1970s, going on to enjoy 44 hit singles. Am I reading that right even? 44. 44 hit singles. Start doing your research. Okay, the press, but of course they won't. 44 hit singles and 7 chart albums before splitting in 1987. Their biggest tracks included Shang-a-Lang, Remember, Bye Bye Baby, and Saturday Night. Les said, none of the producers would spend more time than needed in those days getting the sound they wanted. They'd get select musicians who could do it in. I'm hoping I can actually scroll through this. Oh, and I can't because one thing about this news article is it's been taken down on the website. So that kind of makes sense, I guess, right? Okay, here we go. I actually need to backstep. Okay, so before that, Les said, Phil Coulter and Bill Martin produced our first album, Rollin. So we're talking about the first album here. And they wrote our biggest hits. All those songs were just me and Phil and very good session musicians. I'm very apologetic that I missed that, but it's just that I have to read this through a site that keeps a record of this now. So generally what is being said here is when Phil Coulter is involved with his songs, the band's not playing, but Les is singing. Okay. And that it created tension between him and the rest of the band. Okay. The article continues. The main Bay City Rollers lineup featured McCown, Stuart Woody Wood, Eric Faulkner, bassist Alan Longmore, and drummer Derek Longmore. Other members included Pat McGlynn and Ian Mitchell. This is the big key point. Okay. McCown and Wood continued to perform live tours using different versions of the Bay City Rollers. So if you are a news journalist, or I think this guy is actually a music press journalist, maybe you're going to think about the fact that they have these competing bands. Take that into mind and think about, what am I actually going to publish? But no, he doesn't care, right? Les says Woody has a little thing going, but he never played on the records anyway. That's a pretty sweeping statement. So he has been faking it from day one. He didn't play on the classic hits produced by Martin and Coulter for sure. So essentially, we're getting back to that same argument where nobody played on those 3 or 4 singles, and it was Les's voice. Continuing, the Bay City Rollers were launched with my voice and Phil Coulter's production and session musicians. I'm the voice of Shang-a-Lang or Bye Bye Baby, so if you come to see me, you get to hear the real thing rather than someone faking it. I can't imagine what it must be like to pretend you play one of those songs after all these years. Woody doesn't have to own up to it, but it's a fact. Okay, so I am not hating on Les, and anyone that comes in here and starts hating on Les, as I said, I will actually delete. I will actually delete stuff if you come in here hating on Les on this. Let's look at the facts with this band. They got 70,000 pounds after selling 120 million records. They got 170,000, they got 70,000 pounds each, okay? As far as I know, Eric and Woody, and sometimes Les, wrote a bunch of songs that they also had to fight to get the rights to those songs back. So for a while, they weren't getting paid for that, okay? But, Les is in a special position here in the sense that here we have one of the greatest, and I said this in my first video, one of the greatest male singers of the 70s. He's not getting royalties for the songwriting on the songs because he wasn't writing a lot of them. And his career was stifled based on biases against the Bay City Rollers, and it made it very difficult for him to make money. And he's got his band that is touring, at the time that this article comes out. And then there's another Bay City Rollers band that is touring. And, Les has to pay his musicians. He has to tour. He has to get slots. Not everyone from after being a star in the 1970s is just going to go on and be like, oh, well, I guess now I'm going to be, I don't know. Well, let's talk about Ian Mitchell, actually. So, Ian Mitchell, after his career, I guess he decided to bow out of the music industry, got into computer science, and had a successful career. Derek, after he got out of music, went on to become a nurse, right? But it's not easy for everyone. You can't just say after you've spent, 10, 12, 13 years. Imagine dedicating that amount of time of your life and then saying, oh, I guess I'm not going to do this anymore. People have to do it all the time, and I know it's very difficult, but let's have some reality here. These are people that are struggling. I think everyone in the band had to struggle afterwards. And so I totally get it, and there are fights between different members of the band. What I don't get is a headline like Bay City Fakers when they've got so many albums, and it even said they had 44 hits. Like, I don't even know if that's true. I think that's great if it's true, right? But then the guy goes on to talk about 5 songs, right? So the news article is garbage. Why is it out there? It's out there to sell papers, and they don't care who they hurt while they're doing this, you know? And it really goes back also to the label. They were on Arista. They got nothing. They had to fight for every penny they got, and it wasn't anything near what they deserved. Why not write a nice article about that? No, that's not going to make the paper money. And so this was released in the mail, and I can't even find it on their site anymore. And it's from 20th of October, 2019. So I totally get where all the members are coming from. Like, they're trying to survive. They may be our heroes, but they're trying to survive, and they have bills to pay. They have band members to pay and all of that. And so my big thing, and also in if you see my first video, I have a link to that video where Woody and Eric are just talking about the press kind of destroying them, and I just think with the music industry, you have to take the press with a grain of salt. They want to sell papers, they want to sell magazines, but also something that nobody nobody talks about is that if your biggest competition is some other band on some other label, if you can get something published to embarrass them, you're going to do that. So for me, it's sad to see this going on. I can totally understand what the sentiment was that was driving it. I don't think it should have been published. I don't think it should have been published with the title of Bay City Fakers. I think it's absolutely disgusting that one of the best bands to come out of that country is just libeled in the way that this is doing it. Now it's doing it between the lines, and I talked about why I took down my one video, because who wants to say something that's libelous? And if you read this carefully, it's like they're very careful about what they're going to say and what they're not going to say, right? So this leads me much, and thank you to Firefly, who posted on my first video, much closer to what Firefly was saying. Yes, they were not allowed to play on the songs that Martin and Coulter had written and were producing for them. They played on their other stuff. And it becomes very obvious when you read this article because everyone's afraid to say anything that's libelous, right? Even with talk of Bye Bye Baby, it's like I'm the voice on Bye Bye Baby, which is very true, but there's no accusation directly that nobody else played on that, right? So I think this is very sad, but I think it's very normal, and I think the music press could certainly do a better job. And I think also if you look at, and I'll go right back to it again, like this is not just about the Bay City Rollers. I'm going back to the first thing I said. Pete Townsend apologizes after remarks about deceased Who bandmates. That's because some website somewhere decided that they were going to skewer Pete Townsend because he said it was difficult to play with two of the best musicians in the history of rock. So that's the music press. That's the press. They want their money. They don't care about the bands. The labels don't care about the bands. And I say we take it all with a grain of salt. I have total forgiveness about like members of the band involved in that article because I know the struggles that we've seen all the struggles they've been going through. And I don't want to dive into all of that because I'm more about, how great the band was and how everyone played a role. But the only thing I'm bringing up in this is that the press plays a huge role as well, and the press many times have shot down that band, but they shoot down bands constantly. If you're on Facebook and you get news articles about music, you'll often see it's like, oh, this guy said something horrible about someone in the band, and they just want you to click on it. And the reality is that in most bands that they can't stand each other. Like Johnny Ramone and Joey Ramone could not get along. But as Johnny said, I need him and he needs me. So what are you going to do? Uh, so I think we take it all with a grain of salt. I'm disgusted, absolutely disgusted with the press that I see about music, but it is what it is. And I think we just kind of have to understand it. And I don't think we should jump to any conclusions when you see a news article that says Bay City Fakers. Read between the lines, see what they're actually saying. Essentially, what they're saying is on their early Martin and Coulter written songs, the band were kept out of the studio or it was recorded behind their backs. Simple as that. But as the article also says, they had 44 other hits. So what is it? What's the big deal? So disgusting. Whoever wrote this, John Dingwall. I don't know if John wrote the headline. Absolutely disgusting. Makes me want to throw up when you've got a band that's one of the best bands that came out of Scotland and wrote so many great songs that you can write a headline like that. Absolutely disgusts me. So that's really, I guess, what I'm talking about today. So I think this is the end of my Bay City Rollers versus the labels versus the producers, and now I've added versus the press. And it reminds me of as a Canadian, people were constantly shooting down this guy Wayne Gretzky, who became the greatest hockey player of all time. Now I'll shoot him down now because he does advertisements for gambling. So I'm like, okay, Wayne, you've gone too far for me because I think gambling, advertisement for gambling is BS. But I hate to see people being shot down because they're good. And that's essentially what happened to the Rollers, and the press were involved as well. I see that people actually watched tonight, and I really appreciate that. I'm giving it 2 thumbs up, and I hope I didn't upset anyone. And I'm not saying anything bad about any member in the band, and I don't think that we should. They had to struggle so much. Imagine working as one of the biggest bands in the world for 5 years, 10 years, I don't even know how long, and getting £70,000 as your payment. And if you didn't write the songs, you've got no royalties going on. It's disgusting, you know? So Arista, the press, whoever wrote that story, do better. It's not just about your money. It's about other people that are paying your bills because they're actually writing good music. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. I think that's the end of these types of streams, and I appreciate it. Thank you.